Twisted Metal 2 was even more successful than the first game, considered by many to even be the best game in the franchise, and you know how capitalism works, so a third game was requested almost immediately. So with the original developers off the project and PlayStation still wanting that sweet car combat dollar, the job was thrust upon 989 Studios, the publishers of such games as Siphon Filter, to create Twisted Metal 3. How did they do? Well, let's start off by saying that no matter what I say about this game, I'll upset someone. This entry is either viewed as an underrated favorite or as an irremovable cancerous stain on the Twisted Metal name. I'm pretty much screwed no matter what position I take, so let's just get into the game and save the outrage for later. Twisted Metal 3's premise is identical to that of Twisted Metal 2. Calypso is holding another worldwide Twisted Metal tournament where a collection of wacky racers compete for a single wish.
I am Calypso. Each year I gather the 12 worthiest drivers to face off in the Twisted Metal competition. They must face each other and some of my friends to claim the ultimate prize. I grant a single wish, whatever the winner asks for. To the losers, death. Welcome to Twisted Metal.
You'll pick a vehicle and work your way through levels, blowing up your opponents with weapons, such as the returning fire and homing missiles, or brand new additions like the speed missile and the mortar. The game also looks the best so far, at least as far as graphical fidelity is concerned. The models and backgrounds are detailed, there isn't as much screen tearing and disappearing walls as before, and the vehicles look more like vehicles and less like colored blocks with wheels. This is to be expected though. Even for all their praise, the first two Twisted Metal games weren't exactly cutting edge in the graphics department, a point the developers themselves admitted. There are strange music and audio issues now and then, but from what I understand, this is a result of the PS3's PlayStation 1 emulator that has a habit of screwing up certain auditory features. At least I hope this is a glitch, because if this is intentional, we're gonna have some problems. On to the gameplay front, we're dealing with new devs this go around, so a lot of the basics have changed. To begin, the game's pace is much slower than Twisted Metal 1 and 2. You can interpret this as a good or bad thing, but I personally prefer the more manageable movement speed. It lends itself better to landing your hits properly, makes the swirly controls less apparent. The slow speed is accompanied by the general decrease in map size. Maps line up with the small and medium-sized maps from the first two games, save for the London map, which rivals levels like Paris. This is another matter of preference, of course, and I can't really decide if I prefer it or not. Some maps work out and some don't, it's a mixed bag. I will say, though, that the number of opposing drivers was lowered to compensate for the shrunken maps. Instead of maps featuring 4 to 8 enemies, the number has been cooled down to 2 to 5. A welcome change, in my opinion, as Twisted Metal levels can really start dragging when there are too many opponents, sometimes taking around 15 to 20 minutes because the AI just keeps running away when you try and finish them. Don't get me wrong, I like giant sprawling levels like Suburbia, but with 8 enemies, that stage can take ages to beat. As I mentioned earlier, there are new additions to your arsenal as well, and they're all pretty underwhelming. The speed missile is weaker than a homing missile, which was the previous weakest item, but is slightly stronger than your default guns. It just comes off as kind of pointless with the piddly-ass amount of damage it does, and it only serves to irritate you when you thought you picked up a fire missile. Then there's mortars, in addition to the returning napalm, and I can't deduce any difference between the two. If there's a damage gap between them, I didn't notice it, and they're functionally identical, so what are the mortars for? They seem to home in a little more than napalm, maybe? Maybe they go a little farther, but Overall, the game is easier than the previous two. Despite still using the 3 life system, I only had to use a password once to complete it, which is in stark contrast to the others, where I had to use the password every 2 or 3 levels. In some cases, multiple times per level, depending on how tough it was. Minion. I'd attribute this to the more controllable controls, health pickups actually respawning, and the fact that 989's AI actually seem to attack one another on a regular basis. I would frequently find enemies at less health than I left them, or notice that a driver I left at low HP had been destroyed by someone else. To compensate though, the AI does actually heal itself now, and I witnessed it go for health pickups on multiple occasions, which is something I never saw them do previously. I don't think they were programmed to do so, at least not intentionally. This is something I could certainly do without, and it's probably the worst gameplay change in the whole game. I get that it's supposed to make the event fair, but it's complete fucking nonsense. when a boss has a sliver of health left, then picks up a full heal, and you're right back to square one. Oh, yeah, the AI will still team up and gang fuck you with free shots now and then, so that's something to watch out for that hasn't been fixed. In the end, on the gameplay front, I actually liked Twisted Metal 3, which isn't something I expected. I had heard this game be royally shit upon for ages, and was expecting a hilarious dumpster fire, which would have been fine by me because I'm a big fan of terrible games. But Twisted Metal 3 is nothing like that. Sure, it's lacking in style, and the new drivers and weapons are uninspired, but this game is nowhere near unplayable. Tales of this game's terribleness have been grossly over-exaggerated. Wait a second. I think I'm forgetting something. Something important. Oh, okay. I think I know what people are pissed about now.
I am Calypso, and I fight with a plan Twisted Metal.
With the tournament once again concluded, your chosen driver has granted their audience with Calypso, and if you thought the live-action endings were bad, oh my god.
Axel, last time you wanted to escape the torment of your machine. Now your wish is to become one complete machine. Your wish is granted. Don't worry, Axel. Time flies when you're having fun.
You know how the ending videos are supposed to be your reward for completing each driver's story mode? These are like the inverse of a reward, like a D-ward or something. I feel like my experience somehow loses value when I watch these videos. I would honestly be more enthralled by the text crawl from Twisted Metal 1. Each ending is functionally identical. The character drives into the room, Calypso repeats their wish in whatever poorly worded way he chose, the character screams in god-awful 90s FMV, then the results of their wish are shown to the player. You may be questioning what the problem is, as Twisted Metal 1 and 2 were pretty much the same in this regard, and you'd be right. I sat here for a while trying to pinpoint the issue, trying to put down into words what it was about these endings that rubbed me the wrong way. The animation is trashed here, I don't think I have to explain that. Their over-the-top and ill-fitting childlike silliness is certainly a factor. Sweet Tooth is a murderous, mentally disturbed clown. He's not gonna ask for ice cream and candy, you dumb fucks.
Your wish is to eat all the candy and ice cream you want? Your wish is granted. You should have brushed between snacks.
Barring Mel McMurrin's excellent return as Calypso, the little voice acting there is awful. But I don't think any of that's the problem. I think the problem with these endings, the reason they feel cheap, ill-fitting, and unearned, is because we never hear the drivers speak. When the character just sits there silently while Calypso words their wish for them, and then twists it in his own way that he feels like, well, it comes off like Calypso is cheating, if that makes sense. It feels forced, as opposed to a selfish mistake by the driver, which is what made the ending so fun and satisfying. When the greedy construction worker wishes for the tallest building, doesn't shut up about how great it'll be, and then falls off it because it's too fucking tall, we feel a sense of payoff and catharsis that a selfish person got their comeuppance. Without any sort of conversation or back and forth with Calypso, it seems like the burnt-faced wonder just made up some random wish and gave them some random punishment for no real reason. This especially rings true if you read the character's info sheets on the vehicle select menu, where you'll find multiple drivers whose implied desire has nothing to do with what Calypso does to them. What the hell, did they even proofread this stuff? To top it all off, none of the endings last longer than 20 friggin' seconds. It's not even worth it even if you do enjoy them. Also, the entire game is non-canon. So I suppose we can just ignore all this ending nonsense, making the last 5 minutes a waste of time. Oh well. I've probably spent too long rambling about this anyway, I apologize. The endings and stories are my favorite part of Twisted Metal, and these endings just really bugged me. I had to get to the bottom of why. Irrespective of anything I think, Twisted Metal received middling reviews, usually somewhere in the ballpark of the 6 out of 10. Not unplayable by any stretch, but certainly missing that style and charm that the first two games had. Those reviews didn't hold back sales, though, and with single track still MIA, it was up to 989 once again to dive into the world of vehicular combat and produce yet another sequel. Twisted Metal 4 makes a unique first impression. There's this very strange FMV that depicts the supposed history of the Twisted Metal contest as some sort of old-timey vaudeville traveling show that captivates a young Needles Kane. Which doesn't make sense because a young Needles would be Marcus, unless his insanity is hereditary or an inborn condition. Is that how mental illnesses work? I would assume some of them could be present from birth, but that also brings up the question of whether there's a supernatural element to Marcus's possession, but even that doesn't explain how Marcus has a family if Needles has always been there. The young Needles slash Marcus slash Sweet Tooth person becomes infatuated with Twisted Metal and eventually grows up to compete in the contest and uses his wish to become the Twisted Metal mascot. I've said this a lot, but I must say it again. I'm not shitting with you. That actually happens. Eventually, Needles becomes tired of his position as a competitor, and together with a gang of angry midget clowns, decides to overthrow Calypso, taking the ring that apparently gives Calypso his powers, despite the fact it's literally never been mentioned before this point, and the implication has always been that Satan stole Minion's powers and gave them to Calypso. Never before were any ring shenanigans brought up. To add to all of that, Twisted Metal 4 is technically a prequel, taking place somewhere in the late 90s, whereas the other games take place in 2005, 2006, and 2008 respectively. This game implies Twisted Metal has existed for decades as some sort of traveling show, despite Calypso being in his 30s or early 40s when he was killed in 1993. For the record, here's the math I used to determine those numbers. Feel free to examine it if you wish. This makes it impossible he would have been dicking around in the 40s running the tournament, as he probably wouldn't have even been alive at the time, much less an adult capable of running a demolition derby. We also have to acknowledge the fact that Calypso had run Twisted Metal at least a few times before Needles stole his throne. So with all of this taken into account, if it was absolutely necessary to put Twisted Metal 4 on a timeline, we can take a fairly certain guess that it happens at some point between 1999 and 2004. But I have good news for you. Just like Twisted Metal 3, this game is entirely non-canon now. So yes, the lore is a mess, but luckily we don't have to try to make sense of any of it. Even though I just did. Now is usually where I mention the drivers, so let's get to that. I've skimmed over the characters before because they were fine for the most part, but in this game that is not at all the case. Sweet Tooth is out because of the plot, and while this does grant us Calypso in his only playable appearance...
This is ridiculous, really. Twisted Metal is my tournament, it's my brainchild, it's mine. This will be proven soon enough, and I'll serve this same foul humiliation back to that crooked, collapsed cortex, criminally handicapped, overly made-up clown.
Everyone besides him is, what's the term? Fuckingly sucktacular. I mean, you get the privilege of controlling some all-time classic characters here, like the Hamburglar, Slutty Meter Maid.
That's my character! I'm the trash man!
Every white teen in the 90s, actually just Rob Zombie for some reason, or a fat, ugly drag queen named Drag Queen, which I'm sure is offensive to someone, but at this point, I honestly don't give a shit. These characters are terrible. Easily the worst lineup in the series, in my opinion. No contest. In a strange twist of fate, however, you don't have to play as any of them. Twisted Metal 4 is the first and only entry in the series to feature a custom vehicle creator. You select the size, color, and special move for your own car, and it's pretty neat. Until you realize you can't adjust stats in any way. And all the cars are bland and generic looking. And all the specials are reskins of existing specials. It's basically a good idea that's executed in a bland way. I'd like to see it come back, but at this point I'm not sure we're going to get another Twisted Metal game. So, on the gameplay front, what do you want me to say? You may feel like I'm copping out here, but it's the 4th PS1 Twisted Metal game. There's only so many ways I can describe this gameplay, as it's changed very little up to this point. The controls, weapons, and visuals are all but identical to Twisted Metal 3, barring the fact that the game's physics are totally screwed now for some reason. The only other notable difference is the maps, and this is where most reviews and I differ in opinion. While the general consensus seems to be that the 4th game's maps outshine the 3rd game's, I can't stand the Twisted Metal 4 maps, not one of them. They are at best boring, like Neon City and the Construction Yard, or at worst complete garbage, like Minions Maze and the Oil Rig. Oh crap, I almost forgot. They also felt the need to slap a boss fight onto the end of every single stage for some asinine reason. This results in the largest number of unlockable vehicles so far, which is neat, but I feel they could have, just made more unlockables and skimped on a few boss fights. Despite that stuff, though, it's still just Twisted Metal 3's gameplay, which I enjoyed, so it's not unbearable, and maps are subjective, so I can see how people could both love or hate this game. Personally, it's my least favorite of the PS1 quadrilogy as far as gameplay is concerned. But we've got more than gameplay, ladies and gentlemen, we got endings. So let's just come out and say it, they are not great, but they far surpass the lazy nonsense that was the Twisted Metal 3 endings. These at least have some kind of style and effort put into them, and I applaud them for that. They just suffer from a bad case of PS1 FMV, which is a chronic incurable condition where every rendering of a humanoid figure on a 90s game console has its entire body covered in melting plastic, and its now barely mobile corpse is drop-kicked straight down into the uncanny valley. Look at this little balding clown fucker, look at him! I'm not going to sleep for a week after this video. The driver's wishes and the way they backfire, if they backfire, are more credible and believable than whatever Twisted Metal 3 was doing. I actually like a few of them, and the others are just corny and hokey enough to be the fun kind of terrible. I mean, any game that gives us Kung Fu Calypso can't be all that bad.
Calypso! Congratulations on winning the Twisted Metal competition! What wish?
Spare me the rhetoric. You know what I want.
Out of the question! The competition and the ring stay with Sweet Tooth! Wish for something else!
You forget the rules of the competition. Anything I desire is the prize. I won, and I desire the ring. Hand it over.
The only big criticism I have for these endings is Sweet Tooth doesn't do anything in most of them. He doesn't even speak a single line in the whole game. He usually just stands in the back. What was the point in making him the host if you weren't going to capitalize on it? At least his flaming head is back. Sorry to anybody who really liked Twisted Metal 4 and expected me to go more in depth, but I really just don't have anything else to say about it. That wouldn't just be me repeating what I've already said about the other 3 games. Twisted Metal 4 received reviews. The world reacted with a resounding, at the release of the 4th Twisted Metal game in 5 years on the same console. Car combat games were starting to die out, and people were looking for something different to shake up the formula. The wave of hip 90s counterculture was making way for the 2000s penchant for dark and edgy content. Twisted Metal would have to do something big and really flip the script to keep the public's attention now.